PSNI Chief Constable Simon Byrne is being sued by the grandchildren of a man who was murdered by a member of the Ulster Volunteer Force, the UVF, a loyalist paramilitary group. 55-year-old Sean McParland was shot and killed in February 1994 by a man who's only been referred to as Informant 1. The High Court in Belfast heard this week how the informant used his protected status as a police informant to participate in multiple killings and criminal mayhem. Mr McParland's 4 grandchildren are suing Chief Constable for alleged failures in how the then Royal Ulster Constabulary handled the murder by Informant 1. The court heard the killers, which were Informant 1 and then Ulster Volunteer Force Commander Gary Haggarty, who has since turned into a grass, tricked Mr McParland's grandson Michael Monaghan Jr., aged 9 at the time, into opening the door to the family's home. One of the men then pointed the gun at Michael before turning the gun on Mr McParland, who had been recovering at the time from throat cancer. Michael Monaghan Jr. told the High Court this week that, as my grandfather came into the room, he dropped to his knees and I could see him begging, as in the men. The 4 of us, as in grandchildren, ran out of the house as another gunman passed us. We were hysterical at that point. We were making our way out onto Skegnell Avenue when we heard the shots. For a long time I probably blamed myself for opening the door and for what's happened. It was only in the last couple of years that I realised I wasn't in the wrong. These people came to our house to do what they did. Former Ulster Volunteer Force Commander Gary Haggarty was caught for his part in the killing, which was just one of 5 murders Haggarty admitted to being involved with, but managed to get a reduced prison sentence after he agreed to turn supergrass for the police. However, Informant 1, who was central to the murder of Mr McParland, is said to have been involved in 10 murders, 10 attempted murders, and a host of other serious offences. However, it's alleged that the RUC, even when Informant 1 made admissions of his involvement in the murder, carried out sham investigations into him and ensured that he was released without charge after he was interviewed mainly by special branch informant handlers and was told not to repeat his admissions of guilt and not to say anything. Brian Fee KC for Mr Monaghan set out how the police ombudsman report identified evidence of special branch having blocked attempts to bring Informant 1 to justice and concluded that it was indicative of collusion. Although I'm sure none of us are surprised at that. He added, it is now known that at least one of the defendant's informants was involved in the murder and of Mr McParland. Informant 1 was responsible for murder, and it is now a matter of public record that Gary Haggarty was the primary gunman who fired the bullet into Mr McParland's neck and face and tried to use all the bullets in the gun on him, but the gun jammed after the fatal shot. According to Mr Monaghan's case, police knew Informant 1 was involved in similar serious terrorist crime prior to the shooting, but allowed him to remain on the streets despite the likelihood of him continuing to be involved in murder and other serious crime. Brian Fee KC said, indeed, it is not simply a case of the defendant turning a blind eye, but rather police officers protected him. Even when Informant 1 made admissions of his involvement in murder, the defendant carried out sham investigations into him and ensured that he was released without charge. He was interviewed mainly by his special branch handlers, warned not to repeat his admissions, and was told to say nothing. He added, he was protected by police despite knowledge that he was participating in wholly unauthorised crimes, including multiple murders. This meant that he was at large to murder Mr McParland and was aware of his protected status. Sean McParland's grandchildren are suing the Chief Constable for compensation sought for the mental injuries and trauma that they were exposed to. It's also been said that police have admitted negligence and misfeasance in public office, with this particular case centring around a dispute over the police's level of failure, which would determine the level of compensation. The hearing continues this week and I'll bring you any updates when I receive them.